Well, happy Friday, everybody. Pastor Steve, so excited you've joined me for today's devotion. As I've mentioned previously, I record these early, so Monisa and I are actually in California visiting our daughter and her family, be out there for another week. And if you'd like to see some of the scenes that we're seeing, follow us while we're on vacation. Just check out my Instagram page. The address is there on the screen. And I enjoy sharing, just the fun we're having and connecting with you that way. Well, today we are in Judges chapter 3. So go ahead and open your Bible there if you haven't already. Remember I said Judges chapter 1 and chapter 2 are two distinct introductions to the book of Judges, with chapter 1 being more from the military, historical perspective, chapter 2 being more from the spiritual, God's perspective. How did he see those events? Now in chapter 3, we begin seeing play out the pattern that will happen in Israel's life during the Judges, which was for a few hundred years, but really throughout their entire history up to the time of Christ. The pattern of turning from God, of worshiping the idols and the religions of the inhabitants of the land that they did not remove when God gave them the promised land. And then they're being oppressed by another group of people, an army, a country. And then after so many years of oppression, crying out to God, and God would raise up a deliverer, a judge, who was a hero that made right what was wrong and would lead them to victory and to freedom, and things would be at peace and they would be good for a while, and they would repeat that cycle over and over and over. So you see that here in chapter 3, for instance, verses 5 through 7. The sons of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. These are different indigenous people groups to the promised land that they did not completely drive out when they conquered and settled the promised land, contrary to what God had told them to do. Verse 5, the sons of Israel lived among the Canaanites, etc. Now, verse 6, and they took their daughters, the women of these other people groups and with their pagan religions, took their daughters for themselves as wives and gave their own daughters to their sons and served, here's the key, served their gods, the pagan religions. And the sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and forgot the Lord their God, and served the Baals and the Asheroth. Baal was a fertility god of many of the Canaanite people. The Asheroth was kind of a tall wooden idol, if you will, that was considered a fertility goddess. And so they integrated these pagan religions with Judaism, some even to the point of almost forgetting Judaism. And God was angry with them. And when you look down at verse 8, then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, so that he sold them into the hands of that people group, king of Mesopotamia. This was a group in kind of northwest Mesopotamia, northwest Babylon, up toward Nineveh, if you will. And the sons of Israel served them. In other words, the northeastern part of Israel, of the promised land, ended up being conquered by this other people group because of their sin. And by the way, this was not the entire nation of Israel every time. It was regional. Sometimes that might be the northern part of Israel. Sometimes it might be the tribes in the middle, the tribes in the south, the tribes more to the eastern part, tribes more to the western. So it was kind of a regional thing each time. And then in verse 9, and at the end of verse 8, they were subjected to oppression by this foreign country for 8 years. And in verse 9, the sons of Israel cried to the Lord, and the Lord raised up a deliverer, a judge, for the sons of Israel to deliver them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. So Caleb was his uncle. And it goes on to describe here how he led them to victory and to peace and to freedom and so on. Now, what's interesting when I read chapter 3, and this pattern is repeated throughout the book of Judges, throughout Israel's history, when we think about the judges, we think about the famous ones, Samson, Gideon, perhaps Deborah. But there were 11 judges mentioned in the book of Judges in the Old Testament. Most of us can only name Samson, maybe Gideon, maybe Deborah. The rest of them, they're not famous. We don't talk about them. We don't know much about them. And that got me thinking. Fame does not equal greatness. Because in this chapter, you have 3 of these 11 judges mentioned in this one chapter, and none of the 3 get a full chapter. They're all told about in one chapter. In fact, the last one in verse that's mentioned in verse 31, Shamgar only got 1 verse. Samson, Gideon have several chapters. So these 3 are not as famous as the others, yet in their day, for their people, in that moment, they mattered. They mattered. And in that local area, to the people, the Jewish people they helped, the people that God used them to deliver, they were great. They did a great thing. They were important. They mattered. But yet, across history, unless you read this chapter, you don't know anything about them. Samson, a lot of people know about Samson. Delilah, his hair, his strength. A lot of people, fewer people, but still a lot of people know about Gideon, but not these people. And the point I want to make is, just because one of these judges was not as famous as Samson does not mean they were not great, that they were not important, that they did not matter, did not do an important work. See, what's really important is not whether everybody in America knows your name, everybody in South Carolina knows your name, everybody in Rock Hill knows your name, everybody in your high school knows your name, everybody in your neighborhood knows your name. Fame does not equal greatness. Someone can be relatively unknown and still be an instrument in the hand of God to do something that matters, something great, something that changes people's lives. What matters is, does God know your name? Are you an instrument in His hand, an instrument of good, making a difference? That's what matters. You see, the truth is, most of us will live and die without ever being famous. But that does not mean we didn't do anything great, anything that mattered. Fame? Nah. Doing what matters? Yeah. And as long as you're doing what God calls you to do, that matters. And that's enough fame. God bless you. I'll see you Sunday in worship and then Monday with another devotion.